Good morning. Welcome to the Will Kane Show, the big beautiful bill. Bill, it is generating a lot of controversy, a lot of debate, a lot of hate. I think it is generating a lot of confusion and therefore not a lot of light. Right now at the White House, the Senate Finance Committee is meeting behind closed doors with President Trump on the Make-a bill. We will be watching that to see if the senators have anything to say after the meeting wraps. But in the meantime, what is in the bill and what is not in the bill? Does it increase deficit spending? Does it decrease our deficit? Who is backing down? Who is not? Why is there so much heat? Let's start with the heat and the loudest voices in the room. Elon Musk has gone absolutely scorched earth on the big beautiful bill. He wrote on X, call your senator, call your congressman, Bank of America thinks America is not okay, kill the bill. This, as Elon Musk's continuous opposition is throwing House Speaker Mike Johnson off balance. Mike Johnson said, "We left on a great note, we were texting each other happy texts on Monday, and then yesterday, 24 hours later, he comes out and opposes the bill, and it surprised me, frankly. I don't take it personally, we don't take it personally. Policy differences are not personal. I think he is flat wrong, I think he is way off on this, and I told him as much." I don't know about you, but I have been doing this for quite some time, and I still think the budgeting process is arcane, so it comes as no surprise that people within the Republican caucus or people within conservative circles have differing opinions on the effects of the big beautiful bill. Let's together dive in and see if we can get some understanding. Here are the components. $1.5 trillion in federal spending cuts. The 2017 tax cuts extended permanently, also eliminates tax on tips and overtime. Importantly, there is border security funding and stricter eligibility requirements for Medicaid. Some other elements as well in the bill, including stripping states of the right to make laws or regulate AI for something like 10 years. Something that has drawn the ire of Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House. You see, the White House is still touting its main provisions, and they summarized as follows. Here is Stephen Miller, he wrote, 1. The most significant border security and deportation effort in history, including the entire wall up front. Number 2, full extension and expansion of the Trump tax cuts. This is what the CBO is scoring as non-spending tax cuts, the ones we campaigned on. And 3, the largest welfare reform in history, cutting almost $2 trillion in spending. Those are the 3 major selling points, but still, some Republicans are not on board with the big, beautiful bill. And why is that? Let's take a walk to the wall and see if we can narrow in on the big sticking points. Big beautiful bill. First of all, much has been touted about cutting back on Joe Biden's Green New Scam. So, these are green energy tax incentives that have actually been rolled back. That includes zero-emission projects that don't begin construction within 60 days, and also the clean energy vehicle tax credit. It really made people wonder why Republican senators are opposed to the big beautiful bill. When you take a look, senators like John Thune and Tom Cotton have concerns, and, well, you have to believe they want their constituents or states to hold on to some of those green energy tax credits. But, it's not just green energy. There were cuts to Medicaid, as you heard Stephen Miller respond. Medicaid is the biggest reform to entitlement programs and Medicaid in quite some time. An estimated $60 trillion, $880 billion in cuts over a decade. You've heard Republicans talk a lot about work requirements, more frequent eligibility requirements, and requiring re-verification every 6 months. But some, like Senator Susan Collins of Maine, and we've heard similar concerns from Josh Hawley of Missouri, are worried and trying to figure out what the tax reforms are, trying to figure out the effects on rural hospitals in Maine. Finally, how much of a deficit in savings actually is there in this bill? The big beautiful bill adds $4 trillion over the next 10 years, $7.3 trillion in tax cuts, and you take out the spending cuts. This is what Stephen Miller and Mike Johnson are saying is not accurate. They do not like the CBO's accounting, and they do not like that tax cuts, which we live under right now, are contributing to the deficit. This is Mike Johnson. We have long complained about it. We have seen some work in some areas, but their projection is always, and, what needs to be addressed in some way. You heard him say their projection of growth is always off. The Trump administration, Mike Johnson, point to growth due to tax cuts to reduce the deficit. But even with that, Kentucky's Rand Paul told me yesterday he sees the bill as too big to succeed. To put things in perspective, the bill increases spending for the military and a border over $300 billion. The DOGE cuts, which are not in this bill, were about $200 billion. So this bill actually increases in the first couple years, spending more than all of the DOGE cuts combined. My objection to the bill is that it will raise the debt ceiling more than it ever has, $5 trillion, and that this will be the largest increase in the debt ceiling ever. And if the Republicans all vote for it, the Republicans will own the debt. You heard Senator Paul say he has no problem with the growth projections in the bill. He has a problem with raising the debt ceiling. Let's put that into a senator backing the bill, Oklahoma Republican Mark Wayne Mullen. Senator, thank you for being with us. I think I want to start with the debt ceiling, if we might, together. You heard Senator Paul say that it's a big problem, raising the debt ceiling. He points out, as others have pointed out, if the deficit reduction is real, why do you need to raise the debt ceiling? Kind of like what my wife and I used to do, buying companies all the time. Sometimes we would have to borrow money to purchase a failing company that we knew, with the projection, we knew we could get it into the black, and why it was in the red, we had to go over a hump. We inherited a crap show from the Biden administration. They had literally doubled almost every agency's budget in the last 4 years. We are in debt, and we can't just simply stop spending that debt and expect that we are going to pay it off all at the same time. We have to borrow the money to get us over the hump to let Biden's policies fade out and Trump's policies increase. We know for sure that when we make cuts permanent, when we did, in 2017, CBO said we would have a $1.5 trillion deficit, and actually what happened, the economy increased by $1.7 trillion, which is what we ended up bringing into the Treasury. So we have to borrow to get us past this point, and immediately those two lines will start to close because we start seeing Trump's policies continue to go into effect. We see the economy come back, we see manufacturing come back up, we see job increases, we will start seeing the spending go down. This is just the first cut at deficit spending. What you're cutting is $1.5 trillion in deficit spending. The reason why we are doing $4.5 trillion in the debt increase is because those lines will cross about the same time that runs out, if everything works. Let me make a very important point to you real quick. If we do not do it, because we are going to have to do it, we are going to default on our payments, we have to pay our debt, we borrowed it, we spent it, we have to pay it. So if we do not do it in the reconciliation, our next choice, which, with reconciliation, we only have to have 51 votes, we don't have to negotiate with anybody but ourselves. If we do it again later, which we are going to have to do this summer, then if we do not do it with the reconciliation, it will be a 60-vote threshold. I got that. We will talk about that together. They're already telling me how little time I have with you. I don't care. I want to get this together. I want to stay on the debt ceiling for just one more moment. You understand this? There are people watching right now. There are Republicans that are concerned that Congress, Republican or Democrat, constantly promises spending reductions, and it really has only ever gone up, Senator, and you know that. Deficits and debt have racked up over decades and years. Do you agree with President Trump then? He just put this out about the debt ceiling, like we could pull that up. He said that he wants to do away with the debt ceiling. I'm very pleased to announce, after all of these years, I agree with Senator Elizabeth Warren on something. The debt limit should be entirely scrapped to prevent economic catastrophe, too devastating to be put in the hands of political people who want to use it despite the horrific effect it could have on our country, and directly on the world too. So he doesn't want to incrementally raise the debt ceiling, he wants to do away with it as something that controls government spending. Here's what I want to say. Elizabeth wants to do away with it because she doesn't believe you can spend enough, you gotta spend like a drunken sailor. What the president is referring to here is it should be tied to the budget. If the budget is passed and we are spending X amount of dollars, then automatically we shouldn't automatically assume that will be part of the debt. So if we are going to pass a budget and we will spend vast appropriation bills, then those two should be tied together, and he is not wrong on that. Because what happens every time we go up to a debt limit increase, it becomes a negotiating political tool, and everything in the kitchen sink gets thrown in. And we have seen that, not simply just raising the debt limit, all types of projects end up increasing the debt again. Okay, I understand what he's trying to say there. Last thing, and this is what you talked about, the 60 versus 50 vote threshold. I would love for you to help me and the audience understand what is that line here. You can't institute discretionary spending cuts through the reconciliation package. Big, beautiful bill, you have to focus on mandatory spending, correct? So anything that DOGE has offered up, this is not the vehicle for that. Instead, what you guys are suggesting is that will be done through rescission. You will go back to Congress to have already had a $9 billion suggestion to bring more DOGE cuts in, but that is not satisfying Elon Musk. Why do you think he is dissatisfied, and many others, with the level of spending cuts you brought into reconciliation? Everybody wants more, but when you went to reconciliation, it is a very narrow window because it is mandatory spending, but you can't touch Social Security, so the biggest thing in mandatory spending is Social Security. We can't even get into Social Security through the waste and fraud. That has to go through the appropriation and the discretionary spending to get into it, so reconciliation has a very narrow window. We can only do mandatory spending and just deal with Medicaid. We also can only deal with taxes in a very small window. When we start going with rescission has to be very specific. That deals with, once again, discretionary spending and has to be sent to Congress. Congress has to vote, but because it is a special privilege, it only takes 51 votes at the same time. But if Congress can't enact their rescission, the White House has to send it to us. We got that, to handle it. And way over time, but I have to ask you this last thing. If a viewer is watching or anybody is watching and they are like, what about all of the DOGE cuts? How can they be made permanent? If they can't be done through reconciliation and it has to be so targeted and narrow, how can we see the D? There are two ways: rescission package, which the president can send, and as soon as we finish reconciliation, we move right into appropriations. As we are working with these agencies, remember, DOGE department has basically dispersed out, and they are part of every agency now. They are actually working with the agencies. So as the secretary and these directors are appointed, which are very well qualified, they come to us with a budget and recognize X, Y, and Z that needs to be out of our budget. That is where you will start seeing it in every single meeting we have had right now in the appropriations process, because I'm an appropriator. That's what the secretary brings that information to us. That means the secretary, through listening to DOGE, they will be making the appropriate recommendations to Congress for those numbers coming from DOGE. We hope that